It's not just impoverished parts of the world. It's places like Phoenix, Arizona, and Santiago, Chile, where water supplies are being diminished, where very affluent populations are being profoundly affected. And they're going to have to come up with some very ingenious solutions because we're not going to be doing significant things to address their problems in the near term.
And let's talk about energy, which kind of underlies so much here.
Yeah, it's a cross-cutting theme. The water use to produce energy and the energy requirements for water and food are very major and very connected. Here in the US, where we use so much energy, we're actually a little bit more sensitive to energy security. We're very aware that most of our energy supply comes from, at least in terms of transportation fuels, coming from overseas. And when oil prices go up, we feel the impact very, very quickly. And there are lots of ways of grappling with that. How do we diversify our energy source? I mean, there is an argument that, that comes under a name of a great book that's just out called Turning Oil into Salt. And the idea is that salt was a strategic commodity about which wars were fought hundreds of years ago because it was the main preserver of food, a critical commodity. When salt became so commonplace that, and you didn't need it for food preservation because you had refrigeration and ice, then it stopped being a strategic commodity. Oil right now is essentially a monopoly as a transportation fuel. We have some biofuels, we have some of other alternatives, but they are niche. So there's that issue. Then you think about, okay, is it not just about oil? You've got other hydrocarbons, you've got renewables, you've got nuclear. What's the right balance? All of them bring strategic issues. And, when we get caught up with the conflicts right now, say about nuclear, where Iran is supposedly, according to their perspective, developing nuclear as an energy source, but it also has the threat of nuclear weapons, energy and security get inextricably connected together, and really fundamental political, military problems start to come into play.
Looking at ways to kind of wean ourselves from energy overall. And no simple answer. I'm not looking for, it's a simple question, but I'm not looking for just sort of a simple answer. But so much energy is used in food and so much water is used in food. It sort of comes back to agriculture in a lot of ways, yeah. Do you say?
And you can look at it as a sort of, many people sort of look at it as sort of a triangle where the three points of the triangle are food, water, and energy, because they're all three intimately connected. You cannot think about energy without thinking about its implications for food and water, or about the other two. When we had a big surge in interest in biofuels, and a significant part of the corn crop in the United States started going towards biofuels, that drove corn prices higher. Not just corn prices, though, but other grains started also drifting up. Wheat prices went up, other prices went up. And then you start to look at what food prices do in impoverished countries or in communities in certain countries that are impoverished. These get to be very complicated, very connected issues. And unless you think about all of them together, you're not really thinking about the issue in a clear way. And I'm glad you say no simple answers, because I don't have any simple answers. But I do think that we need to think about these things in a systematic way, in a systems approach.
Finally, we haven't talked about public health security and how that's affected overall. Right. And in some ways, that's sort of this is all running downhill to how is it affecting human right. health across the globe overall.
Right. And, at the end of the day, most people are concerned about environmental issues only to the degree they impact their health. We would allow people to be concerned about environmental issues for all sorts of other reasons, but when it comes home to health, then it really comes home. One leading political figure gave me some advice when I first arrived in DC nearly 20 years ago. He sort of patted me on the back and says, until there are body bags, there isn't really a political issue. And when it starts to become a health issue, then it really becomes important. And so when even though it's not possible to correlate Hurricane Katrina to climate change, certainly the impact and the deaths associated with Hurricane Katrina started people thinking about climate change in a new way. It may not be justified from the science perspective, but it certainly started to have a major impact. And so you really have to bring that back. So climate change also is driving changes in ecology. And so disease vectors, things like mosquitoes start moving in new ways. Diseases start moving in interesting ways. And so you start worrying about pandemics and things like that. Certainly, in order to be healthy, food and water are critical issues.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's just human nature that unless it's really hitting you directly, that you really just don't get excited about it and politically want to try to pressure governments.
And there's also this old adage that change only comes about when not changing becomes so uncomfortable. It's more uncomfortable than changing. And that's about where we are getting to right now. And I think that's why global issues are starting to be seen in a security context. Because what happens if you don't address food security, if you don't address water security? Avoiding those issues is becoming so uncomfortable, so difficult, so painful for many countries that they're being forced to address things they'd rather avoid.
And that's probably more true with the African nations, the nations around the equator, than the more northern countries where the impact isn't quite so high.
It's true. However, when you look at the impact of climate change, it's actually the Arctic Rim countries are actually the ones that are seeing the greatest impact right now. And so issues of security around the Arctic are actually very significant as the Arctic ice coverage, the summer ice coverage in the Arctic starts getting smaller and smaller and will eventually, I think, unavoidably disappear. There are huge security issues that come into play. And there are already lots of concerns about land grabs being made by various countries. And then various countries that are not normally thought of as Arctic countries, but maybe they have a lot of marine trade going on, are looking at that disappearing Arctic summer ice and thinking about what that means to them. And so the equator countries are bringing a lot of, they're in some sense more vulnerable, largely because many of them are so impoverished. When you're that poor, you don't have the ability to build the infrastructure to achieve water, food, health, security. And then it becomes very much a problematic issue.
What do you think about the Rio conference, Rio 20 coming up, and what went on in Darfur just recently? Do you have some optimism here that we're going to get our political house in order globally?
That's a really good question and a really hard one. Let me see if I can answer it in a sober way. I think in the near term, I'm not very optimistic. I think for many, there is still a sense of denial, a sense of avoidance, a sense that we can put this off. And while I think some really important things can happen in Rio, I don't think we should have unrealistic expectations. However, over the long haul, I think you have to remember one thing. That which cannot go on forever won't. Now, the environmental issues and the security implications of environmental issues are becoming more and more pronounced year after year. We will respond to them. The question is when and how painful will the consequences that we've already built into the system be when we get to that change. So I think there's a lot of great things happening. And if I weren't optimistic about the future, I'd have a hard time getting out of bed in the morning. So in the long run, I am very optimistic. However, I am pretty sober about what to expect in the near term.
But the longer term,
we will deal with these issues. We will deal with them. There's no avoiding them. So we will deal with them and we will develop solutions. And there's lots of really talented, ingenious people out there that are coming up with all sorts of solutions. The question is, when will we start adopting those solutions? When will the discomfort of not doing anything become so great that we start adopting various solutions? I mean, there are people out there like Amory Lovins, who has been the guru of soft energy, who has made the very reasonable case that going a more energy efficient route not only makes sense from an environmental perspective, but from an economic perspective and a security perspective. And it's a win-win situation. And yet still, we love to drive SUVs. We love to drive very inefficient vehicles. We love to waste energy because it's uncomfortable to change. And yet we will change.
That kind of gets back to your opening statement about climate disruption and security, climate and the environment, climate and society as being a framework to think about the issues. Because if you do, then you start to look at that SUV quite differently.
Exactly. And I also think it challenges us to think beyond our local community, beyond our home nation of the United States. Things that we do here impact others. Now, so long as that's a one-way kind of thing, we can often be very cavalier about it and say, well, that's their problem, not ours. However, we are constantly facing all sorts of challenges because of what other nations are doing. And so our climate is being affected by other nations. Our food supplies, our energy supplies, the health of our population are being affected by other countries. So we, whether we like it or not, are being forced to engage. And so when you think about the things that bother you in the world, you are forced to think about environment and security issues.
Peter, I really appreciate your insights. This was just a pleasure for me to talk with you for the past 27 minutes.
It's been a lot of fun.
I'm really anxious to get to the conference to hear more about this, and I invite people listening to this to go to the website.
environmentandsecurity.org, just the way it sounds.
And just take a look at that comprehensive agenda over really 3 days and the quality of the global experts that are going to be there. There are going to be some incredible discussions.
It's not just about great speakers, great experts. The purpose of NCSC and the purpose of the conference is about engaging people in developing solutions. And so the heart of the conference, the heart of what NCSC does as an organization, well beyond the conference, is the fact that we engage people in developing solutions. And so if you want to start thinking about these issues in a proactive way and about how it affects you and what you might contribute to bringing about better energy security, food security, water security, and seeing how they connect to each other, then we want you at the conference. We want you to contact NCSC. Engaging in the forum is another wonderful way. I think what you're doing to educate people about these issues is fantastic, and that's what we should be doing more of, and that's how we have to go forward.
This is a great way to get involved, and it's a way to actually make a difference.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Peter. And this is Ed Salzberg with the Security and Sustainability Forum. And I just encourage you to go to the NCSE website and sign up for the conference. I also ask that you consider joining the Security and Sustainability Forum. Membership is free. And the biggest benefit is that you get free access to our incredibly rich archive of videos. You get a chance to dialogue with the experts that make up the panel for these webinars. www.securityandsustainabilityforum.org